Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Surface Calm. Damon Stern stood at the railing of his San Francisco penthouse balcony, watching the sunset paint the bay in gold. At 45, he'd built a tech security empire from nothing, turning his talent for identifying vulnerabilities into a fortune worth over $100 million. The view before him, like everything else in his life, was meticulously earned, calculated, and controlled. Or so he thought. The cruise documents arrived, Vanessa said, sliding open the glass door. His wife of 8 years approached with an envelope in hand, the breeze catching her auburn hair. Damon turned, studying her smile with newfound suspicion. 2 weeks ago, he'd noticed the first discrepancy, a hotel charge in Carmel when Vanessa had supposedly been at her sister's. A small thing, but in Damon's world, small vulnerabilities became catastrophic breaches. 2 weeks on the Mediterranean, she continued, running a finger along his jawline. Just what we need. Damon took the envelope. Sounds perfect. He'd never planned on taking this cruise. The idea had come suddenly from Vanessa 3 months ago, coinciding with strange calls that ended when he entered rooms, with unexplained absences, with passwords changed on their shared accounts. I've already started packing, she said, her voice honeyed with anticipation. The presidential suite has its own private deck. Did you update our insurance policies? Damon asked casually, watching her eyes for the tell, the slight dilation that had given away her every lie since they'd met at a cybersecurity conference where he was speaking and she was attending. There it was. A split-second flutter. All done, Vanessa replied smoothly. They required medical exams for the adventure excursions, but I handled everything. Damon nodded, calculating. The life insurance policy on him had quietly jumped from $2 million to $15 million 2 months ago. He'd discovered this 4 days earlier while searching for evidence of what his gut already knew. I have a meeting with Leland tomorrow about the European expansion, he said. Leland Porter was his oldest friend and CFO. Dinner reservations at Quentin's after. Don't be too late, she said, kissing his cheek before retreating inside. Damon turned back to the view, his reflection superimposed over the darkening horizon. The Damon in the glass was already dead in Vanessa's mind. But Vanessa had forgotten the fundamental rule that had built his empire. Damon Stern always found the weakness in any system before others could exploit it. She's planning to kill you, Leland said, placing his whiskey glass on the desk in Damon's downtown office. That's what you're telling me. Damon nodded, pulling up the evidence on his monitor. Location data from her phone showing weekly visits to a waterfront apartment registered to Reed Beaumont, a maritime security consultant they'd met at a charity gala. Text messages he'd recovered from cloud backups. The life insurance policy with its specific payout conditions. And you're sure about this Beaumont guy? Leland asked, his face grim beneath his gray crew cut. He specializes in marine accidents and investigations, Damon replied. Previously worked for the Coast Guard investigating drownings and disappearances at sea. Quite the convenient expertise. Go to the police, Leland suggested, leaning forward. Damon's smile was cold. And accomplish what? They'd have me file a report. They'd question her. And then I'd have a wife who knows I'm onto her, but isn't behind bars. No evidence of an actual attempt. Then cancel the cruise. And let them regroup? Try again when I'm not expecting it. Damon moved to the window, looking down at the city grid below. No, I need to see this through. What are you planning? Leland asked, his voice dropping to a whisper despite the privacy of the office. Damon turned. I'm going to give my wife exactly what she wants. A husband overboard on a cruise ship. Just not the one she's expecting. Chapter 2. Undercurrents. The Mediterranean sun beat down on the pool deck of the Aurora Majesty as Damon adjusted his sunglasses, watching Vanessa laugh with the ship's cruise director. 5 days into their 14-day cruise, and his wife had been charming everyone. Crew members, fellow passengers, even the captain at the welcome dinner. Everyone except him. When she thought he wasn't looking, the mask slipped. Her smiles faded. Her eyes darted to her phone. And twice now, she'd disappeared for hour-long spa appointments that the ship's activity log showed she'd never attended. Another mimosa, sir? A steward paused beside his lounger. No, thank you, Vernon. Damon had made it his business to learn every crew member's name, to establish himself as the friendly, slightly naive husband who tipped well and asked about families back home. Actually, Have you worked on many Mediterranean cruises? 6 years now, sir, Vernon replied with pride. Wonderful. My wife was asking about tonight's route. Are we passing near any specific landmarks after dark? Vernon brightened. We'll be passing through the Strait of Messina around midnight. Many passengers miss it, but it's quite spectacular with the lights of Sicily and Calabria on either side. Perfect, Damon said, slipping him a €100 note. Our anniversary is tomorrow. Perhaps you could mention this to my wife when you see her? I'd like to surprise her with a midnight viewing on our balcony. Of course, sir. Excellent idea. Damon watched Vernon walk away, then checked his custom-designed watch, the one with the hidden recording function he'd activated the moment they'd stepped aboard. His phone vibrated. A text from an encrypted app sent by the private investigator he'd hired. Confirmed meeting. Stateroom 4217. 35 minutes. Damon stood, stretching casually. Stateroom 4217 was 4 decks down from their presidential suite, registered to a Bryant Wells, the alias Reed Beaumont, had used to book his passage. Damon had learned this by accessing the ship's passenger manifest through a backdoor in their booking system, a vulnerability his company would have spotted in seconds if the cruise line had been a client. Instead, that vulnerability was now Damon's advantage. He made his way to their suite, retrieving a small case from his luggage-hidden compartment. Inside were 6 microscopic cameras and transmitters, products his company developed for corporate security that had never reached the commercial market. Working quickly, he placed them strategically around their suite, focusing on the balcony where Vernon would helpfully suggest a romantic midnight viewing of the strait. Then he headed to Deck 4, his heart a metronome of controlled fury. So it's happening tonight. Leland's voice came through Damon's earpiece as he sat in a quiet corner of the ship's library, tablet propped on his lap. Yes, Damon replied softly, angling himself away from an elderly couple browsing nearby shelves. On his tablet, the video feed showed Vanessa and Reed in fierce conversation in Reed's stateroom. He'd managed to place a device on the corridor ceiling during a brief ship-wide power fluctuation his team had orchestrated from shore. Their words came through with crystal clarity. The strait is perfect, Reed was saying. 1,200-foot depth. Strong currents. By the time they realize he's missing, we'll be miles away. You're sure it looks accidental? Vanessa asked, pacing nervously. The police. I've investigated dozens of cruise ship disappearances, Reed replied confidently. Drunk husband, dark night, high balcony rail. A cliché because it works. You just need to make sure he's had enough drinks. Vanessa moved closer to Reed, sliding her arms around his neck. And afterward, Reed kissed her slowly before answering. We wait 6 months. More appropriately, then the grieving widow finds comfort in her husband's distant acquaintance. A year later, with $15 million in insurance money, we disappear to the property in New Zealand. You getting all this? Damon asked Leland. Every word, his friend confirmed. But Damon, even with this evidence, it's still their word against yours if nothing happens. They could claim it was a fantasy, roleplay. Which is why, Damon said, closing the video feed as the couple finished their deadly planning with a passionate embrace. Something is going to happen tonight. Chapter 3, The Undertow. Dusk settled over the ship as Damon finished his preparations. The suite modifications were complete, an elaborate system of remote locks that would activate with one command from his phone. His meeting with the first officer had gone exactly as planned, with Damon expressing concerns about his wife's sleepwalking episodes. More wine. Vanessa offered with a smile during their private dinner on their suite balcony. She'd been pouring generously all evening, watching carefully as Damon seemingly drank glass after glass. What she didn't notice was the device in his sleeve that redirected most of each sip into a hidden compartment. A magician's trick, learned from a client who specialized in high-end corporate espionage training. Delicious, he said, feigning a slight slur. Did you bring the special bottle? The one from our wedding. Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes, surprise that he remembered, guilt that she'd forgotten, but she covered quickly. It's in my bag. For tomorrow's anniversary. A lie. Their anniversary was 3 months ago. A test to see if she'd correct him, which she hadn't. How about a toast now? He suggested, adding a deliberate wobble as he stood. To us. To the future. Vanessa hesitated, then smiled. Why not? I'll get it. While she searched through her luggage, where no such bottle existed, Damon activated the micro cameras throughout the suite and pressed a hidden button on his watch, signaling his shore team. Now anyone monitoring the ship's GPS location would see them precisely where Vanessa and Reed expected, approaching the Strait of Messina. In reality, the captain had subtly altered course an hour ago, following a navigational recommendation from maritime authorities, actually Damon's team. They were now passing through a different, wider channel, with completely different rescue jurisdictions. "I can't find it," Vanessa said, returning to the balcony with a frown. "Maybe I packed it in the other bag." "No matter," Damon waved drunkenly, nearly knocking over his glass for effect. "This is good too." As expected, there was a knock at the door. "Vernon, right on schedule." "Mr. Stern," the steward's voice called. "A quick reminder about tonight's strait passage. Should be visible from your balcony in about an hour." "Thank you, Vernon," Damon called back with exaggerated cheer. Vanessa's expression shifted. Alert. Calculating. She checked her phone, then smiled at Damon. "How wonderful. We should stay up to see it." "Absolutely," he agreed, stumbling slightly as he rose. "Need to use the restroom first. Too much wine." In the bathroom, Damon removed a small case from behind the ventilation panel where he'd hidden it earlier. Inside was a synthetic skin disguise, another proprietary technology from his company's government contracts division. The face that looked back at him from the mirror minutes later belonged to Reed Beaumont, down to the small scar above his right eyebrow. While the disguise set, he sent the text he'd composed hours earlier from a clone of Vanessa's phone. "I'll push him overboard tonight. The life insurance is $15 million. Meet me at the service stairs afterward, bringing cash and passports." Reed would receive this just before midnight, believing it came from Vanessa. Meanwhile, Damon had already switched their cabin door numbers, a simple matter with tools and replacement placards. Anyone heading to the presidential suite would now arrive at the adjacent junior suite, vacant but identical in layout, which Damon had gained access to through the ship's compromised booking system. At 11:50 p.m., Damon Stern disappeared into the service corridor, leaving behind his intoxicated wife on the balcony, staring impatiently at the sea. At 11:58 p.m., Reed Beaumont emerged onto the deck below, positioning himself by the railing. At midnight, Vanessa's phone chimed with a message seemingly from Reed. "Ready when you are. He's drunk enough." And at 12:03 a.m., ship security cameras captured Vanessa Stern slipping from her suite and moving swiftly down the service stairs to the lower deck, where a figure stood by the railing, back turned, looking out at the dark water. "Reed?" she whispered, approaching cautiously. The figure turned slightly, profile visible in the dim light. "Everything's set." She moved closer. "Damon's practically passed out on the balcony. I'll bring him out for air, then over the rail. You have the statement prepared for security." "Everything's ready," the Reed-faced figure confirmed. "The insurance company won't question a thing." Vanessa stepped closer, her voice dropping. "I can't wait to be rid of him. His controlling, perfectionist routine, his suspicion of everyone. I've been suffocating for years." "Just a few more minutes," disguised Damon replied, turning back to the water. "Then freedom." He sensed rather than saw her movement, the shift of weight, the subtle intake of breath before action. Years of martial arts training took over as he pivoted, ducking at the precise moment Vanessa lunged forward, hands outstretched to shove him overboard. Her momentum carried her against the railing. Damon straightened, watching her eyes widen in shock as she teetered on the edge. "You," she gasped, recognition dawning as she saw through the disguise to the eyes beneath. The eyes of the husband she'd planned to murder. Damon said nothing, making no move to either push or save her. He simply watched, impassive, as she struggled to regain her balance. At that moment, the real Reed Beaumont burst onto the deck, responding to the text he believed came from Vanessa. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, seeing Vanessa hanging half over the railing and a version of himself standing nearby. His confusion was all it took. Reed rushed forward, intent on pulling Vanessa to safety. In his haste, he collided with her, and the combined momentum sent them both over the edge. Their screams were swallowed by the wind and waves before the emergency alarms began to wail. Chapter 4: Salvage Operations. "Mr. Stern, please accept our deepest condolences for your loss." Captain Ricci sat across from Damon in his office, as the ship steamed back toward the coordinates where Vanessa and Reed had gone overboard. The search and rescue operation is ongoing, but I must prepare you for the possibility that my wife is gone, Damon finished, his face a mask of appropriate shock and grief. I understand, Captain. Can you explain once more what happened? Asked Lieutenant Pascal from the Italian Coast Guard, who had been helicoptered aboard. You were in your suite when she fell? Damon nodded, eyes downcast. I'd had too much to drink with dinner. I fell asleep on the balcony lounger. When I woke up around midnight, Vanessa was gone. His voice cracked convincingly. I thought she might have gone for a walk. Then the alarm started. And you had no knowledge she was meeting this man, Reed Beaumont? None, Damon whispered. I'd only met him once at a charity event months ago. I had no idea he was even on this ship. Captain Ricci and the lieutenant exchanged glances. Sir, the lieutenant said carefully, the witness statements are concerning. 3 passengers reported seeing your wife attempt to push Mr. Beaumont overboard before they both fell. And Mr. Beaumont's stateroom contained items suggesting they knew each other quite well. Damon allowed his expression to crumble further, a man learning of betrayal atop tragedy. Are you saying my wife and this man were? He didn't finish the sentence. We believe they were having an affair. Yes, Captain Ricci confirmed gently. There's also the matter of Mr. Beaumont's identity. Our preliminary check shows he previously served with maritime law enforcement specializing in shipboard accidents. I don't understand, Damon said, injecting confusion into his voice. Why would Vanessa try to push him overboard if they were involved? The lieutenant's face hardened slightly. That's what we're trying to determine, Mr. Stern, particularly given the substantial life insurance policy recently taken out on your life. Damon's performance was flawless, the shocked husband hearing of his wife's betrayal and possible murderous intent for the first time. By the time search operations were called off 48 hours later, the narrative had solidified. Vanessa Stern and her lover had plotted to murder her husband for insurance money, but something had gone wrong during their attempt. The ship docked in Naples, where Damon was interviewed extensively by Italian police before being allowed to fly home to San Francisco. By then, the investigation had expanded dramatically. 7 bodies, Detective Beverly Rhodes said, sliding photographs across the conference room table at San Francisco Police Headquarters 1 week later. All women between 28 and 35. All found in industrial freezers in a storage facility rented by Reed Beaumont under an alias. Damon stared at the images, genuinely shocked despite having orchestrated the chain of events that led to this discovery. When he'd crafted his plan, he'd known of Reed's suspicious past, the unexplained resignations from 3 different maritime agencies, the restraining orders from 2 ex-girlfriends. But serial murder had not been on his radar. We'd never have found them if not for your information about his finances, Detective Rhodes continued. The account transfers between your wife and Beaumont led us to his other identities. I still can't believe Vanessa was involved with. Damon gestured at the photos, letting revulsion show on his face. Rhodes studied him carefully. We don't believe she knew about his other activities. The evidence suggests their relationship began approximately 8 months ago. The first victim disappeared 3 years ago. Do you think she really meant to? Damon left the question hanging. Kill you, Rhodes finished bluntly. The evidence is compelling. Text messages, the insurance policy, the witness statements from the ship. If they'd succeeded, you'd have been victim number 8, just with a different modus operandi. Leland had arranged for Damon to have the best criminal attorney in San Francisco present during all police interviews, but it had proven unnecessary. Every piece of evidence pointed away from him and toward the narrative he'd constructed. We'll need you to remain available for further questions, Rhodes said, gathering the photographs. But at this point, you're not a suspect in any way. In fact, you're lucky to be alive, Mr. Stern. That's what everyone keeps telling me, Damon replied quietly. Chapter 5, Changing Tides. 3 months after the cruise, Damon stood in the marble lobby of Stern Security Solutions, watching as workmen installed a new company logo. The building around him hummed with activity. Engineers developing new systems, sales teams closing deals, PR representatives handling the flood of interest that came after his story hit the national news. Sympathy for the betrayed husband who narrowly escaped death had translated into the biggest quarter in company history. The Goldman contract is signed, Leland announced, joining him by the windows. They're implementing our systems in all their international offices by year's end. Damon nodded absently, his focus elsewhere. Still thinking about the lawsuit? Leland asked more quietly. Damon's mouth tightened. Despite the mountain of evidence against Vanessa and Reed, Vanessa's family had filed a wrongful death suit against him 3 weeks earlier, claiming he had somehow orchestrated the events on the cruise. Led by Vanessa's sister Lydia Prescott, they were demanding half his assets and challenging the insurance company's refusal to pay out the policy on Vanessa's life. Let them waste their money, Damon replied. They have nothing. That journalist is still sniffing around, Leland warned. Charlotte Weber. She's been interviewing crew members from the ship, asking about your behavior during the cruise. Damon had anticipated this. Any situation this perfect would draw scrutiny. She's welcome to investigate. Everything I told the police and media is completely true. It was his particular talent, constructing situations where he never had to lie outright. He had been in his suite when Vanessa disappeared. He had awakened to alarms. He genuinely hadn't known Reed Beaumont was a serial killer. The fact that he'd manipulated events leading to these truths was unprovable. Sir, his assistant interrupted, approaching with tablet in hand. Ms. Weber is in the lobby, demanding to see you. Security is asking how to proceed. Damon exchanged glances with Leland. Send her up. Let's hear what she thinks she knows. Charlotte Weber did not look like the hardened investigative journalist who had exposed 3 corrupt senators and a human trafficking ring. With her pixie haircut and delicate features, she appeared barely out of college. But her eyes, sharp, assessing, gave her away as she took the seat across from Damon in his office. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Mr. Stern, she began, placing a recorder on the desk between them. Most men in your position would hide behind lawyers. I have nothing to hide, Ms. Weber, Damon replied evenly. And please, call me Damon. All right, Damon, she said, activating the recorder. Let's talk about the night your wife died. You claim you were asleep in your suite. I was. The toxicology report confirmed the level of alcohol in my system. Yes, and yet ship security cameras show you perfectly steady on your feet 20 minutes earlier when you visited the purser's office to report your missing cufflinks. Damon allowed a small smile. I have a remarkably high tolerance. Ask anyone who knows me. I can seem perfectly functional and then crash completely. Convenient, Charlotte noted. Almost as convenient as the cabin number switch that several passengers reported. Apparently, the presidential suite was briefly labeled as a junior suite that night. I reported that to ship security the next morning, Damon countered smoothly. Vandalism happens even on luxury cruises. Perhaps someone thought it was a prank. Charlotte leaned forward. You know what I find most interesting? Your company specializes in security vulnerabilities. The ship's computer system experienced glitches during the cruise. And you just happened to be on the same ship as your wife's lover, with both of them falling overboard after supposedly plotting to kill you. You're suggesting I somehow arranged all this? Damon asked, injecting the perfect note of incredulity into his voice. Orchestrated my wife's affair with a man who turned out to be a serial killer. I'm suggesting, Charlotte replied carefully, that a man with your resources and knowledge of security systems could have discovered the affair, learned about the plot against you, and set a trap that resulted in both their deaths while appearing completely innocent. Damon stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. My wife was plotting to kill me with her lover. I only survived because I was unconscious from alcohol when she expected to push me overboard. Instead, she and her accomplice somehow went over the rail themselves. And now her family is suing me, while journalists are trying to paint me as some mastermind villain. He shook his head. The truth is far simpler and sadder. I failed to see the woman I married was capable of murder. Charlotte studied him, clearly unsatisfied but unable to poke holes in his narrative. Anything else, Ms. Weber? He asked quietly. She gathered her recorder. Just one thing. The ship's first officer mentioned you spoke to him about your wife's supposed history of sleepwalking, a condition her family and friends say she never had. Why make up something like that? For the first time, Damon appeared genuinely surprised. A small miscalculation he hadn't anticipated coming to light. I never said she had a history of sleepwalking, he replied smoothly. I mentioned I was concerned she might be sleepwalking on the cruise after finding her on the balcony one night, disoriented. Perhaps the officer misunderstood. Charlotte's eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps. After she left, Leland entered, his expression worried. That woman's dangerous. She's thorough, Damon corrected. But without evidence, all she has is speculation. And if she finds evidence? Damon turned to the windows, gazing out at the city. There is none to find. Chapter 6, Storm Warnings. She's publishing tomorrow, Leland said, pacing Damon's living room 6 weeks later. Weber's editor confirmed it. The perfect murder. How Damon Stern got away with orchestrating his wife's death at sea. Damon remained calm, watching the sunset from the same balcony where he'd first confirmed Vanessa's betrayal. On what evidence? That's just it, Leland replied, pouring himself a generous scotch. She claims to have found a witness, someone from the ship who can place you on the lower deck near where Vanessa and Reed went overboard. This was unexpected. Damon had accounted for every security camera, every crew member's position. Who? They're not saying. But the magazine's lawyers wouldn't have cleared it without something substantial. Damon considered this new development. The wrong witness with the wrong information could unravel everything. Not enough to convict him, perhaps, but enough to turn public opinion, to embolden Vanessa's family in their lawsuit, to damage the company. There's more, Leland continued grimly. The police have reopened parts of the investigation based on Weber's information. Detective Rhodes called your attorney this afternoon. Damon's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. The screen showed an unknown number. Damon Stern, he answered. Mr. Stern, this is Charlotte Weber. Her voice was tight with excitement or anxiety. I thought you deserved a courtesy call before my story runs tomorrow. How thoughtful, Damon replied dryly. I understand you're claiming to have a witness who saw me near the incident. A moment of silence. Yes, a cabin steward who was servicing the storage closet on that deck. He saw you in the corridor minutes before your wife and Reed Beaumont went overboard. Damon processed this. Vernon. It had to be. He'd calculated the risk of the steward being in that section during his operation, but had deemed it acceptable given Vernon's schedule. A miscalculation. That's fascinating, Damon said calmly. Particularly since I was in my suite, as ship's computer records of my key card usage confirm. Key cards can be used by anyone, Charlotte countered. And interestingly, our digital forensics expert found anomalies in the ship's security logs for that night. Sections missing or corrupted. Exactly the kind of traces left by someone hacking a system. Sounds like you've built quite the conspiracy theory, Damon observed. I look forward to seeing what your lawyers allowed you to actually publish. One more thing, Mr. Stern, Charlotte added, her voice hardening. We found the specialist who created your prosthetic facial disguise. He's agreed to testify that you commissioned a Reed Beaumont mask 3 weeks before the cruise. The line went silent as Damon processed this true and serious threat. The disguise expert, a former movie industry professional named Alvarez who operated in a legal gray area, had been paid an untraceable cryptocurrency through multiple proxies. Damon had considered him the one loose end, but had calculated the risk as minimal given the man's own illegal activities. Another miscalculation. Mr. Stern, Charlotte prompted after the extended silence. Ms. Weber, Damon finally replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through him. Publishing false allegations against me would be a serious mistake. For both you and your magazine. Are you threatening me? Charlotte sounded more intrigued than intimidated. Not at all. Simply stating facts. My attorneys will be in touch. Good evening. He ended the call and turned to Leland, whose face had gone ashen. We need to implement contingency protocol, Damon said quietly. Now. The explosion at Charlotte Weber's apartment building occurred at 3:17 a.m., gas line rupture according to first responders. The fire spread to 3 floors, forcing emergency evacuation of 28 residents. Charlotte Weber was not among them. When firefighters finally reached her unit, they found her unconscious from smoke inhalation, clutched protectively around an external hard drive and a file box. Both she and her evidence survived. The same could not be said for Enrique Alvarez, the special effects artist, whose car plunged off the Pacific Coast Highway that same night. Body never recovered from the churning waters below. By morning, Detective Rhodes was at Damon's door with a search warrant and a team of officers. This is harassment, Damon's attorney protested as police methodically moved through the penthouse. This is a murder investigation, Rhodes replied coldly. Attempted murder of Charlotte Weber and the confirmed death of Enrique Alvarez. both key witnesses in the case against your client. Damon maintained his composed demeanor. I was here all night. My building security and cameras will confirm that. Yes, just like ship security confirmed you were in your suite when your wife went overboard, Rhodes observed sarcastically. Funny how technology always seems to back your stories while witnesses end up dead or nearly so. Detective, Damon's attorney interrupted sharply. Unless you're formally charging my client, this line of questioning ends now. Rhodes studied Damon with undisguised suspicion. We'll be monitoring all your communications and movements from now on, Mr. Stern. One misstep, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. I understand your frustration, Detective, Damon replied with perfect sincerity. You want justice for Vanessa and the others. So do I. After the police departed with his computers and phones, Damon turned to his attorney. They have nothing admissible, the lawyer assured him. The Weber woman's witness is circumstantial at best. The effects artist is gone. Without direct evidence linking you to either incident last night, they're fishing. Damon nodded, already calculating his next moves. The contingency protocol was designed for exactly this scenario. Evidence eliminated, alternate explanations established, distance created between himself and necessary actions. Leland would have already initiated the secondary measures. What about Weber? He asked. Will she still publish? Her editor just announced they're delaying the article pending further investigation. The attorney replied, checking his phone. The explosion has them spooked about potential liability. Damon gazed out at the city, face impassive. The storm wasn't over, but he had weathered worse. Every system had vulnerabilities. Charlotte Weber, Detective Rhodes, Vanessa's family, all were variables to be managed, neutralized, or redirected, just like Vanessa herself had been. Chapter 7, Hidden Currents. The prosecution calls Charlotte Weber to the stand. 6 months after the cruise ship incident, Damon sat beside his attorney in a San Francisco courtroom, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression appropriately solemn. Not for his own trial. The police had never gathered sufficient evidence to charge him, but for the civil lawsuit brought by Vanessa's family. The courtroom fell silent as Charlotte Weber walked to the witness stand. She had recovered fully from the explosion, though a thin scar now traced her hairline. Her gaze briefly locked with Damon's as she took the oath, her expression resolute. Ms. Weber, began Lydia Prescott's attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Corinne Talbot. Please tell the court about your investigation into Vanessa Stern's death. Charlotte detailed her findings methodically. The cabin number switch, the anomalies in ship security systems, the steward's testimony placing someone resembling Damon near the overboard location, and the special effects artist who had allegedly created a disguise before his own suspicious death. Objection, Damon's attorney interrupted. The witness is presenting speculation as fact and referencing an alleged witness who isn't present to be cross-examined. Sustained, Judge Harmon replied. Ms. Weber, please limit your testimony to directly observed facts. The journalist adjusted accordingly, but the damage to Damon's narrative had been done. Jurors exchanged glances. Reporters scribbled furiously in the gallery. During cross-examination, Damon's attorney was surgical. Ms. Weber, do you have any actual evidence, not conjecture, not circumstance, but evidence, that Mr. Stern was anywhere other than his suite when his wife went overboard? The steward's testimony. The steward who conveniently transferred to a cruise line in Southeast Asia and cannot be located for testimony? Charlotte's jaw tightened. There are the security system anomalies, which the ship's IT director testified could have resulted from the outdated systems they were using. Any other direct evidence? The special effects artist, who died before giving any sworn statement, leaving only your notes of an alleged conversation that cannot be verified. By the time cross-examination ended, Charlotte's testimony had been systematically dismantled, yet public opinion remained divided. Outside the courthouse, protesters carried signs reading, "Justice for Vanessa," and "Domestic violence hides behind money." This isn't just about the lawsuit anymore, Leland observed in Damon's office that evening. Weber's article may have been delayed, but the story's out there. The company's lost 3 major contracts in the last month. The board is getting nervous. Damon nodded, studying the financial projections on his tablet. The company could weather the storm, but not indefinitely. Not with Charlotte Weber continuing to investigate, with Detective Rhodes still pursuing leads, with Vanessa's family feeding the media's interest. What about the data from Alvarez's cloud storage? He asked. Our team is still trying to crack the encryption, Leland replied. If he stored evidence of your commission there, it could surface anytime. Damon placed the tablet down carefully. Then we need to change the narrative. How? The jury looks skeptical. The media is calling you the cruise ship killer. And, by giving them a better villain, Damon interrupted. And I know exactly who it should be. The next morning, Detective Rhodes received an anonymous package containing a USB drive. The cybersecurity department spent 24 hours verifying it contained no malware before allowing her to view the contents. What she found changed everything. Email exchanges between Reed Beaumont and Leland Porter dating back 14 months. Financial transfers. Detailed discussions of Damon's schedule, his marriage, his vulnerabilities. The final message, sent 2 days before the cruise, was damning. Everything's in place. V believes the plan is hers. Once D is eliminated, the company restructure gives us controlling interest. Stick to the timeline. Rhodes stared at the evidence, pieces realigning in her mind. Leland Porter, Damon's oldest friend and CFO, had been the puppet master. He'd manipulated Reed, who in turn had manipulated Vanessa, all to gain control of Stern Security after Damon's death. And if true, Damon had been the intended victim all along, not the mastermind. Chapter 8. Treacherous Shoals. Leland Porter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and evidence tampering. The arrest at Stern Security's headquarters became instant national news. Camera crews captured the CFO, being let out in handcuffs, ashen-faced and silent. Within hours, the narrative of the cruise ship case underwent a seismic shift. Damon expressed shock and betrayal in a carefully worded press statement. To learn that my closest friend and colleague conspired with my wife to end my life for financial gain is devastating beyond words. I've cooperated fully with authorities and will continue to do so as this painful chapter unfolds. In the courtroom, Vanessa's family's lawsuit collapsed as their attorneys scrambled to regroup. Judge Harmon granted a continuance, but the damage was done. Public sentiment swung decisively in Damon's favor. The betrayed husband, doubly victimized by wife and best friend, wrongly suspected because he'd survived their plot. Only Charlotte Weber remained unconvinced. This is too convenient, she insisted to Detective Rhodes in the detective's office. The evidence against Porter appears just when Stern needs it most? After months of nothing, Rhodes looked exhausted, the case having taken over her life for nearly a year. The emails were authenticated by 3 independent experts. The financial transfers are documented. Porter's offshore accounts match what was promised to Beaumont in their exchanges. Planted, Charlotte argued. All of it. Stern has the technical expertise to create undetectable forgeries. And what would be his motive now? Rhodes countered. If he orchestrated his wife's death, why implicate Porter afterward? Why not just let her and Beaumont take the blame as he originally set up? Charlotte paced the small office. Because I was getting too close. Because the civil trial was turning against him. Because he needed a new villain when the old one wasn't working anymore. Rhodes sighed. Without evidence, Weber, that's just a theory. Meanwhile, Porter's not denying the communications with Beaumont. His lawyer is already floating an immunity deal for testimony. Because Stern got to him too, Charlotte insisted. Promised him protection, reduced charges, financial security for his family if he takes the fall. But even as she spoke, Charlotte recognized the futility of her position. With Porter's arrest, the official narrative had solidified around Damon as victim. Her editor had permanently shelved her exposé, citing liability concerns. Her sources had gone silent. Leland Porter sat across from Damon in the prison visiting room, separated by plexiglass. 2 months had passed since his arrest, and the former CFO looked diminished, his confident bearing replaced by nervous vigilance. Is it done? Leland asked quietly, conscious of recording devices. Damon nodded almost imperceptibly. The arrangements for your family are complete. The offshore account is funded. Your wife has the instructions for accessing it after your sentencing. Relief washed over Leland's face. And the reduced charges? The prosecutor will offer manslaughter with possibility of parole in 7 years, Damon confirmed. Accepted immediately. 7 years, Leland murmured, calculating. My youngest will be in college when I get out. With a trust fund that would make Midas envious, Damon added. You're saving your own life, Leland. If this went to trial with the evidence they have, it would be life without parole. The evidence that Damon had meticulously created over months, building the digital trail between Leland and Reed piece by piece, fabricating backdated communications, constructing the financial connections. A masterpiece of technological deception that had survived expert scrutiny. Leland met his gaze. Rhodes still suspects you. Without evidence, suspicion is meaningless. And Weber? Damon's expression hardened slightly. No longer a concern. 2 days earlier, Charlotte Weber had received a job offer from an international news organization, a position in their Tokyo bureau covering Asian technology developments. An opportunity too prestigious to decline, created through Damon's connections and funded through proxies that could never be traced back to him. Distance was often more effective than elimination. Charlotte would be halfway around the world. Her credibility on the Stern case diminished by Porter's arrest and confession, her audience unreceptive to conspiracy theories about a man now widely viewed as a victim. When this is over, Damon said, rising as the guard indicated their time was ending. Remember our agreement. Complete silence buys your family security for life. Leland nodded, the weight of his choice evident in his slumped shoulders. Was any of it real? Our friendship. Damon paused, considering the man who had been his closest confidant for 20 years. The man who had stood beside him as he built his empire. The man who had never betrayed him in reality, only in the elaborate fiction Damon had constructed to save himself. You were the only person I ever truly trusted, Leland, Damon answered truthfully. That's why it had to be you. Chapter 9. Clear Horizons. 1 year after the fateful cruise, Damon Stern stood on the observation deck of his new yacht, larger and more luxurious than the cruise ship that had changed his life. San Francisco Bay glittered below as guests in formal attire mingled on the expansive deck, celebrating the launch of Stern Security's revolutionary new cybersecurity platform. The company had not only recovered from the scandal, but had emerged stronger. The narrative of its founder surviving betrayal and murder attempts had become corporate legend, burnishing Damon's reputation as the man impossible to deceive or defeat. Stock values had tripled. Government contracts poured in. Mr. Stern, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Sorry to disturb you, but your speech is scheduled in 5 minutes. Damon turned to find his new executive assistant, Meredith, tablet in hand. He'd hired her 6 months earlier. Highly competent, professional, and with no connections to the company's tumultuous past. Thank you, Meredith. I'll be right there. As she departed, Damon took a final moment alone, surveying what he'd preserved and what he'd sacrificed. Vanessa and Reed were gone. Their bodies never recovered from the Mediterranean. Leland was serving his sentence at a minimum security facility, his family financially secure for generations. Charlotte Weber was building a successful career in Tokyo, her interest in the cruise ship case fading as new stories demanded her attention. Detective Rhodes had officially closed the investigation following Leland's confession and sentencing. Vanessa's family had withdrawn their lawsuit after a modest settlement that included non-disclosure agreements. Damon had emerged not just intact, but victorious. His empire was stronger than ever. His reputation had transformed from successful businessman to almost mythic figure who had survived a conspiracy worthy of a thriller novel. Yet victory had cost him the only things he'd ever truly valued: trust and loyalty. Everyone close to him had been sacrificed or removed. He stood alone at the summit he'd defended so ruthlessly. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced as Damon approached the main deck. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Stern Security Solutions, Damon Stern. Applause erupted as he took the podium, the assembled industry leaders, politicians, and media figures hanging on his every word. A year ago, Damon began, his voice steady and commanding. I learned a painful lesson about vulnerability, about betrayal from those closest to us, about systems we believe are secure until they're breached from within. The crowd grew silent, captivated. That experience taught me that true security isn't about building impenetrable walls. It's about constructing systems that survive even when trusted elements turn hostile. It's about planning for betrayal as a certainty, not a possibility. As he continued his speech, unveiling the new security platform that would revolutionize corporate and government protection. Damon reflected on the true innovation that had saved him, his ability to see the fatal flaws in any system, including his marriage, and act decisively to eliminate threats before they eliminated him. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the yacht cut through the darkness toward his private dock, Damon stood alone at the stern. The San Francisco skyline receded behind him, lights glittering like the Mediterranean stars that had witnessed Vanessa's final moments. His phone chimed with a notification from the company's secure server. A potential vulnerability had been detected in the new platform, minor but potentially significant if exploited by the right adversary. Damon smiled faintly as he began analyzing the report. This was the world he understood. Systems with weaknesses that could be identified and eliminated. A perfect, controllable order where nothing was left to chance and no betrayal went unpunished. He had survived the deepest betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. The vulnerability in his company's new system would be addressed by morning, patches deployed, breaches prevented. Just as he had patched the vulnerability named Vanessa and the one named Leland, and all the others who had threatened what he'd built. In Damon Stern's world, threats were identified, neutralized, and discarded. Always. Without exception. Without mercy. And he would never, ever forgive. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.